today we are with Tumi Makgabo. Tumi Makgabo is a trailblazer. I mean, when I was young, I was waking up and listening to Tumi Makgabo on Hard Talk, and all of a sudden she was on CNN. She was there every single day pretty much, and she is the reason why I started watching CNN regularly. You know, she covered 9/11 amongst many things that she covered, have met and spoken to almost all world leaders from all walks of life. So to me, I mean, you are coming from the south tip of Africa, going onto the global stage to the #1 news channel in the world. You were the first of your kind from South Africa, a Black girl, nogal. Tell us more about really, how did you do it?
Wow, I love how that intro went. Thanks, Yolanda. It's actually quite interesting. I never set out to be on CNN or never set out to do anything in the news. I actually ended up working in the media because I needed work while I tried to study for my law degree. The law degree never quite happened because I ended up being so busy in the media work, and I ended up in the newsroom in South Africa. And again, that was purely because I thought, well, you know, I'm kind of done doing the continuity presenter thing. I think I'd like to try my hand at the news. So I went and did an audition. Rian Krevachen actually auditioned me and offered me a job. To cut a really long story short, I ended up on SAFM, and one day out of the blue, I got a phone call. It was in the morning. I used to do the morning show on SAFM, Do the News, before I hosted the show with John Perlman. And I just got a call, and somebody said, would you be interested in working for CNN? And I thought it was a joke. So I actually was like, no, seriously, who is this and why are you calling me? Because I'm at work. And they said, it's 4 o'clock in the morning where I am. Believe me, this is not a joke. So I tried to compose myself as best I could, because it was about 5 minutes before the news bulletin. Needless to say, I don't remember that news bulletin or what happened. I literally went in, read it, and because I'd said to them, okay, I've got to go to the news, call me back in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And they called back in 10 minutes and said, well, you know, we're looking for an anchor. Would you be interested in doing an audition? I went to London to do an audition. Didn't go very well. At least I don't think it went very well. But then I got the call and they offered me the job. So it really was never a plan per se. It wasn't something that I had set out and said to myself, I want to achieve, because when I was in school, I wanted to go to law school. So television was kind of what I do while I do the serious stuff of law school. As I said, law school never happened. Well, I started, but I didn't finish my law degree. And because I ended up doing so much work, and then I was at CNN. So it was really quite a, I don't know if I would say it was fortuitous, but it was certainly unplanned. And it was somebody who, I guess, saw something in me from wherever they were in the world and thought that I might be a good fit. And of course, I'm very grateful that they felt that way about me.
I mean, what do you think they actually saw in you in South Africa? What was it that you were doing? What was in your work ethic? What was it that you think actually made them actually make that call at 4 a.m. in the morning?
I think, Yolanda, to be honest, because I didn't have any formal training or a journalistic background, I tried to work as hard as I could. So I would always review my work after every single show. I would always try to figure out what it is that I could do better. And I think that kind of pushed me to improve to a level where I was professional enough that they felt that they could work with me. It was very, very different. It was worlds apart from being at the SABC to being at CNN. But I think the difference was, in my case, was that they just felt like one would be able to grow into what they foresaw. I think also the fact that I felt very strongly about working on myself. I felt very strongly about making sure that I was as ready as I could be for each newscast or each bulletin. I would make my husband, I was married at the time, I would make my husband record my shows, so I would watch afterwards from home and try to not dissect it, but try to figure out what worked, what didn't work. I had nobody to teach me to do that. I think it was just my inherent nature, but I think also a little bit of insecurity, because I felt like maybe because I hadn't been to journalist school, there was something I was missing or something that I didn't know that everybody else might know. You know, that thing, that imposter syndrome that a lot of people suffer from, and particularly women suffer from. And I think that was part of the issue for me. So rather than it be a driver, I think it was more a desire for me to earn the recognition and the faith that people had put in me to put me in the newsroom at the SABC, first of all, on the really late news bulletins, and then earlier on. I felt like I needed to do well so that people didn't feel like they had made the wrong appointment. And in many ways, that process actually taught me a lot about myself, a lot about my subsequent work ethic. And I think it stood me in very good stead up until today. I think those very basic principles of checking myself, making sure that I've done what I need to do, is no longer so much driven by imposter syndrome as much as it is by understanding that it's important for me to do well and to try to give of my best. It's not always perfect, but to give of my best at all times, because I think people do recognize that. They see that that is actually what you're doing, and they watch you. People watch you a little bit like kids, you know, people see you more than they hear you, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So the spirit of excellence, I mean, it must have started somewhere. Were the people in your life that sort of guided you, people that you could speak to, people that sponsored you, people that mentored you as part of your journey?
Interestingly enough, there weren't many. For me, watching my parents, they both worked very hard. They were working class. They weren't, you know, we didn't grow up wealthy. We had everything we needed, but we didn't have excess or extra. And I think it was watching them and seeing how they always tried to do well, or always pushed themselves and always worked hard, that made me understand that it was important that I do the same in order to take care of myself. I unfortunately, because there wasn't anybody else who was Black African, there were South Africans. You'll remember Anand Naidu was South African. Nadia Bilchik had also been on CNN, but there were no Black Africans, let alone South Africans, who had been on CNN before. So when I got there, I pretty much continued in the vein of what I had learned when I was at the SABC, which was to continue to check myself, to ask the questions, even though sometimes it meant that I felt a bit silly or a bit stupid asking those questions. I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot more. And in fact, when you ask about mentorship, Yolanda, I think I would have achieved a lot more in that space had I had a mentor. I think there is a lot that I would have liked to do. I think I would have liked to be out in the field more, reporting more, but I didn't have that guidance as to how to go about doing those things. And once you're anchoring, that's kind of what you're doing, and you get busy, and as you say, you're on 6 days a week, 7 days a week sometimes, and that becomes, you know, your job. So I think that there would have been a couple of different choices that I would have made had I had that guidance, and I unfortunately ended up in a space where in many things I've ended up doing, There haven't been many mentors. So I've kind of had to figure it out until later on in my life, where I was able to find some people whom I could turn to for guidance and advice. And I think that's what makes me realize that I would have benefited even more from that had I had it earlier in my career.
Yeah, I mean, still an amazing story, even if you didn't have the super mentors at an early stage. I think you've done fantastically well. I mean, it was proud moments. I know as a young Black person, looking at someone like me, listening to CNN, I mean, and it was for many of us. We were talking about it for months, you know, once you started, but you know, Tumi is on CNN, right? So thank you so much for being that for a lot of us, just being able to be a trailblazer and do the kind of stuff you've done. I mean, even within CNN, I know, you know, you are being a little modest here. You were co-producer, if I remember, of the Inside Africa show, which is still happening even today. So, I mean, those are great strides, because you didn't actually just make strides for you, but also for the continent, and putting the continent on the map, that the continent can produce excellent African people that can be able to actually live up to the exacting standards of a CNN. So thanks a million for being that inspiration, being that trailblazer. Just maybe as a parting shot, what would you say to any woman out there who's sitting back and was thinking, could I be the next Tumi? Maybe not necessarily in media, but also in my space, where it seems almost impossible for me to think of myself and say, can I be in the top of, I mean, the #1 company in the world sitting right here in South Africa today? What would you say to that woman?
Just a couple of things before I speak to that woman, Yolanda. One thing that did happen to me, which I think also helped me on my journey, was when I got the job, I got a call from Dada Madiba inviting me to lunch. And my husband and I went over to lunch with him and Mama Grasa. And I remember him saying to me, don't forget that when you do this, you're not just doing it for you, you're not just doing it for us, you're doing it for the entire continent. And I found that very heavy. It was extremely heavy. But I think when I look back on it, it was also quite right. So speaking to your point about doing things not just for ourselves, I think it happens in so many spaces. Yes, I was one of those that was the first on a global platform such as a news network. But I think the point is that somebody has to go first, right? And you being the one who goes first is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's not necessarily unimaginable. So I think it's important that we don't restrict ourselves in terms of the size of our dreams, but that we say to ourselves, well, you know, what's the worst thing that can possibly happen? And that's a question that I often ask myself. I ask my children all the time when I feel afraid, and when I feel scared, and when I feel as if this is overwhelming. What's the worst that could happen? My first few weeks when I was in Atlanta, we were looking for a house, and my family was there, and we were running around, and I was kind of getting in the mode. And then came the time when all of that was done and I had to go to work. And I remember saying to my husband, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can go. I don't think I want to do this. No, I think I must go home. And he just looked at me and he said, well, yeah, we can go home. He says, but we're here, so you might as well just go to work.
You've bought the house, you've moved, you've done everything.
Yeah,
and then
we've got all of this. We've got the house, we've got the kids here, we've got the schools. We might as well go to work while we figure out, because now you want to go home. So while we figure out that, let's just go to work. Obviously, he was just trying to get me out the door and to go to work. But I think the point is, these examples I'm giving, Yolanda, are simply to say that there is very seldom a point where we don't feel afraid. There is very seldom a point where we don't feel overwhelmed by the thought of something new or by the thought of a dream. And to me, the worst thing that can happen if you try, is that it doesn't work. It's very rare that it'll kill you. It's very rare that it will be devastating to your life. And I'm not talking about life and death things. I'm talking about dreams and ideas that we have. Dreams don't often kill us. They don't destroy us. If anything, they act to inspire us. So for me, one lesson that I learned in all of this was not to limit myself. I was lucky enough that I was never told as a child that I couldn't do X because I'm a girl, or I couldn't do, my parents, you know, never told me what I couldn't do. And so I don't tell myself what I can't do. I say, well, if you want to do it, give it a shot. The worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work. Or the worst thing that can happen is that somebody will say no. And more often than not, people can say yes. Certainly if you've done the homework and you've put in the effort, oftentimes you find that people do say yes. So to that young person, I would say that your dreams are your dreams. Even though CNN wasn't necessarily my dream, what I did want to do was push myself. And I'm so glad that I did. So whatever it is, don't be afraid to take that step. As big as it may be, as scary as it may feel, as overwhelming as it may feel, don't stop yourself, because yeah, and also the kids and the young people and everybody's watching, not to criticize, but because it suddenly becomes possible, it suddenly becomes accessible, it suddenly becomes doable. So today we're forever seeing Black South African actresses on television as news anchors for various networks around the world for all kinds of things. And I'm not saying I'm solely responsible for that, but I think it's when you see others like you doing that, it makes it easier. So why not be that for someone else?
Wow. Thank you so much for those words. So we have to be a factory of manufacturing opportunities for ourselves. This is effectively what you're saying, because you're saying, let's push ourselves. I mean, let's see everything as an opportunity rather than as a risk. You know, keep on pushing yourself. So, and actually have in mind this whole idea of positivity, that things can actually turn out right more often.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that pushing yourself is when things happen. It's when opportunities emerge that you never even thought about. That you know, my ending up in the newsroom was purely because I wanted to push myself, and I ended up at CNN. So yeah, push yourself, and don't be afraid of what you can achieve, because oftentimes we are our biggest stumbling block. We are the ones that are first to tell ourselves that we can't, we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not thin enough, we're not this enough. And in fact, you're all of those things, but you have to believe it first before anybody else can ever believe it.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Tumi. On that lovely note, we're going to end it. You know, I really appreciated speaking to you. This really for us is a month around making sure that people actually connect with mentors. You spoke to that actually mentors can inspire you to do more and actually guide you to do more, coach you to do more, and actually be able to accelerate your own dreams, your own aspirations in a way that is more directed almost. So hopefully in this month, we'll be able to help a lot of people, a lot of women to do that at the Mentorship Boardroom. And once again, thank you to me, and thanks for making time for us. I mean, you are an inspiration.
Before you go, can I just say, I think you're absolutely wonderful, but you know that apart from the fact that I think you're wonderful, I think this initiative about the Mentorship Boardroom and that project is really, really significant. And I think it's fundamental, and it changes potentially the way people think about themselves, their circumstance and their lives. And I think that is, if anything, exactly what we need. We cannot build economies. We can't do anything if we don't have people who believe in the possibility of what they can achieve. So thanks for doing that, Yolanda.
Oh, thank you so much to me. I will pass on the message to the team. It is a team effort. There is an entire team that sits behind me to make this possible. Thanks a million for those kind words.